is David Lichtenstein, and welcome to the Yeshiva Shalmaila. This week we're going to be speaking about sports in Halacha and Hashkafa. Going to ball games, is there a problem with it? Idolizing, deifying sports figures, is there a problem? Making these godlike figures out of Shaquille O'Neal or LeBron James. And you're asking me, like, why not? Well, we have, Torah says, loisachanem, and the Gemara says you're not supposed to say kameno akum zed. The Rambam brings it in Hilchos Avodah Zarah. B'bnei shegoyrem lehidabek imay v'lilmay b'maisim haroim. Are we allowed to deify athletes? Sefer HaChinuch says the same thing. Hinu nimnoim milischaber imoim umilirdoif acher ahavasam umililmay davar mikol masayim haroim. It's brought in Shulchan Aruch too. I think it's in Kufna and Aleph and Yeredeya. And by the way, just for you who are not sports fans who happen to be listening to this, open up a paper. You're in Eretz Yisrael, you don't even know who these players are. But open up your Hamodia, Mishpacha, Yated Neman. Name your favorite one. I guarantee you this week there was some glowing article about our dear beloved President Donald Trump. What happened to these halachas of Loisachanim, Kamenoe Nachrizeh, or Maisav? Brought in the Rambam, Chinuch, Shulchan Aruch, etc. Same thing about presidents, politicians, as well as sports stars. What about contact sports? Could your kid play a game where you couldn't get hurt? People get hurt playing, football, rugby, soccer, etc. So a pitcher was recently hit somebody in the head and died in baseball. What about Khal Isha? You have a woman comes out to sing the national anthem. Et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to be we have a bunch of very interesting guests this week. We have we go around the globe, from Moshav Matisyahu in Eretz Yisrael, we have Hagoyin Reb Leff, a famous mechanech, and he actually was at a soccer game in England with his grandchildren, and it became a clip that went around the world where they panned on him. Everybody's watching this exciting game, and he's sitting there with the Talmud Yerushalmi, deeply absorbed in it, learning. And here's a clip the commentator made about it. This is the on the ear, like Channel 7 in England, BBC, watching this rabbi with his Gemara. Listen to this clip.
I think you missed the goal. Must be a good read.
From Eretz Yisrael, we're going to have Reb Shea Chaitofsky. He's the Menahel of Torah. He's the grandson of Reb Chaim Pinchas Scheinberg, the Mechaber of so many Sfarim, a Gadol, the Tabas HaChoshen, and he'll speak about his grandfather of Scheinberg's being a Yankee fan, his affinity for baseball and the Yankees. From New Jersey, we're going to have the famous lecturer, Reb Mordechai Becher. With him, we're going to do a deep dive into the Halacha. And then from New York, we're going to have Reb Yosef Viener. He's going to be speaking about the Moshav Leitzim, Kalisha, Achila B'Shuk, etc., etc. Should be a very interesting program. I want to take a moment to put in an advertisement for our sponsor. There's a fabulous sefer that's come out on Hilchos Shabbos, Mishnah Berurah Cheli Gimel. It's called Mishnah Achrayna. It was shipped. It's this week in your Sfarim stores. And I think it is the best sefer put out on Hilchos Shabbos ever. And why do I say that? It's basically a compendium of all the halacha of the last 130, 140 years since the Mishnah Berurah Cheli Gimel was put out. And the world has changed. When you learn Hilchos Shabbos, you're learning, Bishul, and you learn about an oven that's shaped like a migdal. Well, guess what? I never saw an oven shaped like a migdal, and neither have you. It's pre-electricity. The Mishnah Berurah talks about dirt floors. Well, I don't know anybody who has a dirt floor. Almost from any simon, beginning about washing clothes on Shabbos. What's the halacha post-washing machines? So it takes all the new halacha, it also does a lot of beer too, of the last 140 years, puts it all into one sefer with all the Maramachaimis. And here's where it's different than, let's say, Dirshu or some of the others, is that it on the bottom is all the debate. You know that here in this program we like to debate. Nobody likes to, from the calls, you can see everybody argues. If you have, what is the old expression, 2 Jews, 3 opinions, same thing in learning. This is the halacha. Really, tell me why. So on the bottom, concise and everything, what is the debate? What is the issue? Where Talmud Chacham could then say, well, is my particular case, is that the story over here? We've printed 12,000, 11,000 sold in Eretz Yisrael, or were distributed like this. They went out in a flash in 2 weeks. We brought 12, well, a little less than 11. We brought 1,200 to America. I believe they're going to go in a flash. I don't know when it will be reprinted. So I urge you, if you enjoy this program, you enjoyed Halacha, you enjoyed debate, run out and get the new Mishnah Achrayna, Chele Gimel, on Hilchos Shabbos. I would like to say a word on the Parsha. What does it say next week, Parshas Chukas, or this week, depending when you're listening, talks about the Parah Aduma. Lokach HaKohen Eitz Erez Ve'ezayv El Hishlach El Treifas HaParah V'kibes Begadav HaKohen V'rachatz B'sar B'mayim. The Kohen who brings the Parah Aduma, who's makravit, is Tamei Ad HaErev. And then the same thing, the person who's Mazeh, who sprinkles the blood and is Mitayr, all the people that's Meimez, he becomes Tamei Ad HaErev. The person who brings the offer Chutz HaMachna, he becomes Tamei Ad HaErev. So Chazal remark something very interesting. The Parah Aduma, right, those who are Mitayr, it's Mitayr es Hatzmeim. Makes sense, that's the purpose of it. But it's Mitame es Hatayrim, which I've wondered about for many years. What does it mean? The Mitayr is Mitame es Hatayrim. What's the logic to it? So I want to share with you a thought. And I think it's a new and original thought. If somebody's seen it someplace, please send it to me. But I had, we get a lot of guests Shabbos. Very often, by the way, listeners send emails, and if we have space, we gladly put them in. So we have Lively. So we had a girl, she works for quite a famous psychiatrist, and she shared the following story. She said that there was a patient who the psychiatrist was seeing for a while. She said it was a year or so, and they get a call one day that he committed suicide. Well, it wasn't effective. The, mental illness is health, is a very, something we struggle with as a generation. So she went in and she told the psychologist, she was in shock. She said, did you know so-and-so died? He committed suicide. So the doctor looks up and he says, was he current on his bill? Because it's hard to collect after death. And she was like grounded, like, is that the appropriate question? And she said it hit her then, like, for the doctor, it's like they try to keep it very impersonal, right? Which makes sense, by the way. If we're in the business of helping others, you could be a mental health professional. You could be a parent. You could be a friend. How many friends put their arms? Well, people suffer from, certainly mental health professionals, they suffer from stress, anxiety. Has anybody here heard of anxiety? What about burnout? You hear so much sorrows, you could get burned out, exhaustion. So they separate themselves. In fact, I saw one I don't know if it's the Bedichasa, but one of the Achrayim writes, Toiv sheberoifim legehenim, which really doesn't make sense. If he's the best of doctors, should go to Gan Eden with all the people he's helping. He says, no, Toiv sheberoifim legehenim means he has Gehenim in Olam Hazeh. So how do they shield themselves from this? They become very impersonal. So I think the Torah is teaching us a lesson here, something powerful. If you are the person who is Mitayr Tmeim, you become Tameh. What's the Torah saying? Don't become divorced from it. Don't ask did he pay his bill. Get invested. Even if it means emotionally you are now invested. Care. Have real empathy. Show empathy. And you could cry too when we hear somebody who's going through real tsar. That's the right way, the Torah is telling us. Any kohen who's involved in any stage of it, he becomes tameh, and that's the appropriate thing. If you want to be mitayres hatzmeim, some of it will rub off on you, and you know what? And that's okay. That's the way it's supposed to be. So with this, I have a very good pshat in the Yerushalmi. There's Yerushalmi in Zmai. It says, Omer Rebbe Yeshua ben Kavsei, Kol Yamai, my whole life I struggled with. Hayisi koira hapasik hazeh, v'hize hatoyer al hatamei. The toyer sprinkles on the tamei. Toyer echad mazal tamei echad. 1-to-1. Every time a kohen spritzes, he becomes tamei. But could one cup kohen be metayer many? No. 1-to-1. He says, until I learned me'otzur shel yavna, that one could be metayer many. What does he call Yamai? What was he being mitzvah? He was saying, Well, if that's the truth, if that's what the Torah wants us to do, to get invested and to shed tears and have empathy and believe, well, that means you're going to get burned out. You can only do this to one at a time, and then you're going to collapse, right? That's what it means. So he said he learned from a pasuk that no, somehow magically, if you get invested, you're not going to get burned out. And you could do it to many, many, many. And there's sort of a haftacha here. You're going to be maza on many, and you will remain tired until you finished all the hazah, and then you tamei ad ha'erev. And by the way, this is for a rav. How many rabbeim, they get invested in children, and they say, is it going to wipe me out? Or a rav. They go to shiva, they go to simchas, but they also go to levayas. Big part of a rav's job is, if you're a teacher or just a good friend, you have haftacha here. First of all, it's telling you the right thing. If you're not invested, you should become tamei. But you know what? You could do many. You will have the koyach to carry on. Years ago, we were someplace, and I met the head of the Cleveland Clinic. And my wife actually reminded me the story. And he was a frum Yid, and I sadly don't remember his name. He was the head of oncology for the Cleveland Clinic. And I looked at him and I said, how do you get up in the morning? I mean, how many of your patients die a week? You're the head of oncology in the Cleveland Clinic. And he recounted a fabulous story. He said, around 10 years ago, I went to see Rav Palm. And he said, I'm quitting. I can't deal with it anymore. I sit there and I am invested and I cry and I can't do it anymore. I want to stop. And Rav Palm said to me, he said, you have it all wrong. He says, when somebody is ill, it's gzeira min HaShomayim. Or if you're a Rebbe, and I'm here ad-libbing, a teacher, somebody's struggling, it's often gzeira min HaShomayim. They inherited it. They had the wrong parents. They had the wrong job, the wrong skills. It's gzeira. He said, whatever you do, you're just adding value. The person was supposed to live 6 months. You got them to live a year. They were going to live 3 months. You got them to live 6 months, a week, 3 months. Anything you do, he says, you're only adding value. Is that true? So the doctor said, yeah. So he said, so you're not the person who made the gzeira. The person who's dying, I added a month to you. That's the right, he said, that's the Torah de Hashkafa. We believe the gzeira is there. I am only adding value. So I think that's sort of, you're afraid you're going to get burned out? He says, no. What's the Lashon Yishalmi? It says, I thought it was, he's a Torah al Tamei Echad. He says, no. Torah Echad Maza al Kama Tmeim. You will have the ability. But the right thing is, get invested, and yet you will stay healthy. That's the story of the Parah Aduma. Before we go to our guests, I want to share with you the riddle of the week. It says, Vayidar Yisrael neder Lashem. Vayomer, this is when they battled the Midyanim. Vayim nasein titein es ha'amazeh biyadi v'chramti es hareim. So what does Rashi say? I will give all the shlalom legavaya. They made a neder in an ace tzara, and they said, I'll give it to Gavaya, and they were successful. So you see, hanoider al davar shaloi bala olam. The nidra is Khal, and he's mechuyev l'kaimai. Now the Rambam in Hilchos Eruchin brings a raya that a neder and davar shaloi bala olam is Khal from Yaakov Avinu. He in Bereshis before he went to Lavan's house. He's kol asher titin li aser esrenu lach, and he says he was mekayim his neder. So the Marit al-Ghazi, the great Sfardish Goyin, asked the following question: why does the Rambam bring a raya from Yaakov Avinu? That's Koyd the Matan Torah. Many things we don't learn. You can't marry two sisters, or not Yaakov Avinu's 4 sisters. Anybody who does it is in deep trouble, right? He should have brought a raya from our parsha, which is post Matan Torah, that it says Vayidar Yisrael neder im nasein titein, and that's what they did. So you see from there is muchach that even after Matan Torah you could make a neder on a davar shaloi b'laylam. This is the kasha of the great Marit al-Ghazi. And let me share with you one mohara. The mun was nivla beivarim. It was absorbed by the body. And what does it say? V'nafshenu katza b'lechem hakolkol So how does Rashi say? The man was nivra beivarim, and they were worried that their stomachs would split. That's what one of the revolts against Moshe. So Rashi says, Yesh yulud isha shamachnes ve'enei motzi. If we eat and it doesn't come out of us, right? Something must be going wrong. That's what they complained to Moshe. So here's the Pella. When does this story happen? It happens in Parshas Chukas, which is the 39th year, right? This is before Aaron is dying. It's before Moshe dies, right? Wait a second. For the last 38 years, you've been eating them on, and everybody's been as healthy as could be. Nobody died. Nobody's stomach split open. Why over here does Rashi say, to bring a chazal that we're worried about, that our stomachs will blow up from the mun? They waited 38 years after eating it. Those are our two riddles of the week. Let's go to our guest. We have on the phone with us Hagoyin Reb Leff. He's the Rav of Moshav Matisyahu. He's a mechaber of Sfarim, printed in English, etc., from Art Scroll, Outlooks and Insight, a number of other Sfarim, a Talmud of the Tolz Rosh Yeshiva of Gifta. Welcome, Rabbi Leff.
Thank you. Just
Rabbi
one
Leff.
correction.
Yes.
Before we started this interview, I wasn't a Gaon, and I
Okay.
didn't become a Gaon on the spot.
Okay. So I've left. There was a famous picture of you by a soccer game, sitting and learning Talmud Yerushalmi with good orangutan in Talmud Yerushalmi, and it made waited around the world. It was like spoken about on British media, etc. So let me ask you the hashkafa about taking a child or going yourself to a baseball game in America. If you're in England, they don't play baseball there. To a soccer game. Give us your hashkafa on this.
Okay, can I be mocked in something that's in general and then apply it to this?
Yes.
I have a word that before we left Mitzrayim, the Rebbe Shalom told us to take gold and silver. Everybody knows that. But he also told us to take Egyptian clothing. And he even said to put it on our children, which is very strange insofar that not wearing Egyptian clothing was one of the zechuyos we had to go out of Mitzrayim. So why would the Rebbe tell us now to take Egyptian clothing and put it on our children? I want to say that the Rebbe wanted to teach us a lesson. That clothing couldn't have been anything wrong with it halachically, because otherwise you couldn't put it on your children or wear it in the midbar. But therefore it must have not been shatnez or not sanua or anything else that could be wrong with clothing. And yet, had we worn that same clothing in Mitzrayim the last 210 years, we wouldn't have gone out. Because in Mitzrayim, wearing that clothing had implications. It meant you wanted to be like a Mitzri. In the midbar, it had no implications. So then you could judge it on its own merits, and if it's okay to wear, it's okay to wear. What is asur and what's mutter really depends on the time and place and conditions, whether that thing in one time or place may have certain implications, and therefore even if midalet chelkei HaShulchan Aruch, there's nothing wrong with it, but in that place at that time, it could be 100% asur, and in a different place, a different time where it has no implications, then you judge it on its own merits and it could be okay. The Menahel sports, even though in the Gemara Avodah Zarah speaks about not going to circuses of goyim or theaters or things similar to that, but Lamaisa, there it's basically because it's a Moshav Leitzim. The question is, what makes it a Moshav Leitzim? Right? The Bach in Siman Reish Chav Daled says that it's also to go to places shemislotzitzimakum, because the simcha of the goyim, right, the extra simcha, a Jew shouldn't be there because of abeilus of the churban. And he says that people who go there will not be nehenim sudas leviyasim. In Siman Shin Tez Zayin, Hilchos Shabbos, it says over there that a person shouldn't go to be a person who catches or goes hunting with dogs or whatever. And the Chayei Adam in Klal Samach Gimel Says also a person shouldn't go to places where there's chok and lotzon. He mentions magic tricks and bullfights and tightropes and things like that. The shaila is, what is wrong with all these things? There's a shuvas in the Pri Hasoda that says that even going to the zoo is also. Basically because these things are Bikul Torah. So Lamaisa, most shittas hold that it's not just the Bikul Torah that's the problem, but it's a problem that these places are places of Leitzonis, Mislotzitzim, and Mislotzim means that there's a certain scoffing, there's something wrong. The note of Yehuda says that going to bullfights or hunting or whatever is itself not a Jewish kind of thing. If the only problem is Bikul Torah, so sometimes you say Bitul or Hikiyuma, sometimes a person needs vacation, relaxation, even to go to the zoo or whatever. And then if it's the only reason is Bikul Torah, then it should be mutter. For instance, the Pri Megadim says that hunting or whatever, if you're doing it for Parnasa, is mutter. There'd be something intrinsically wrong with it, so then it wouldn't be mutter for Parnasa either. But if it's only as Bikul Torah, so a person is allowed to be Mavakal Torah, to make a Parnasa. So I want to say the following. In Eretz Yisrael, sports have an implication because they're a hallmark of the secular society, which is Jewish, and it's very difficult, especially for children, to make a distinction between the secular Jewish society and the Farum Jewish society. So there have to be tremendous yogim. And sports is associated with chiloniyut. So therefore in Eretz Yisrael, the children are very much discouraged from playing sports, soccer themselves. Surely no one would think of going to a soccer game. In America, I don't know what it's like in Europe. It would be different. But in America, I know of Choshev Rabbanim who were Talmidim of Baron Kotler, who were Rabbanim in Choshev place who went to baseball games. I know that when I was the head counselor, not the head counselor, but the learning counselor in camp called Torah years ago in Cleveland, and it was a Telzer camp, we took the children to a baseball game, the Cleveland Indians, once during the summer. Because in America, sports don't have any implication of being associated with a society that we would have any kind of connection with. It's just another kind of entertainment. It's like going to the zoo. So where it doesn't have implications could be that it's mutter. It's definitely Bikul Torah, but like I said, sometimes Bitula Hikiyuma, person needs some kind of diversion. He needs some kind of relaxation, entertainment, and that's mutter. V'haraya. There are glatt kosher concessions in Yankee Stadium in Baltimore, I know, and in Cleveland, where there must be people who are mocked on glatt kosher who go to these stadiums. So would I suggest in Eretz Yisrael for a child or even an adult to be involved in soccer games there? Definitely not. In America, where it's mekubal and it doesn't have implications, if a person needs that diversion, I don't see that there's something wrong with it intrinsically.
Rabbi Leff, let me get into trouble. Let me I'll throw out a few more examples. The one he has daiti. You know, the Maram Shik was fire and brimstone against doing that you had to do mitzitza bepeh, and it can't be done with a sponge or any other way, right?
Right.
There's a tshuva from the Chassam Sofer where he writes there's nothing wrong with it, and the Maram Shik was Gadol HaTalmidim.
Right.
What happened? When he has daiti, I'm saying what happened between them? That was the era when the Chassam Sofer was very against the reform. You know, the Haskalah.
Right.
Haskalah, in the time of the Maram Shik, came out and they said, we want to be Mavatal Mila. They said, there's no more, it's pagan, etc. So the Maram Shik said, Mavatal Mila, we can't change an iota of Mila. Every part of it, the Mitzitza Bepeh, absolute. You can't touch anything.
Right.
Even though his Rebbe, right? And I think Machine Matzah by the Sanzarov, also, at that time there was a movement against matzah. He said machine matzahs, fire treife. What's wrong with machine matzah? It's technologically, it could be done. Machines do things a lot faster than humans.
Right.
But it was the message that's being sent.
Right.
The cultural message that's being right.
Right. 100%.
There are many other examples of this halachically where there was a cultural message. Now, let me ask you something else. I know it said in the article you went with your grandchildren. Do you think that if you have children or grandchildren, that it's hard maybe to sit down with a 7-year-old and talk to them in learning, and as grandparents we should, or parents, we should have a kesher with our children, that it's a good thing for a father to say, is this what you're interested? Fine. I'll take you to the game, and you were sitting there learning. Do you think, Rabbi, being Makai, you're doing what the obligation is, which is basically to keep a relationship with your children? What would you think? Like, could there be a davar tov buried there?
Yeah, that wasn't the obligation.
What is it? But what is our obligation? How much do we have to stretch to accommodate our children and grandchildren who at their ages they can't talk in learning, or maybe a child is going through the Gemara. What does the Gemara say in Erevin and Daf Chavches? Rab Zerek havi chalosh migirse havi yazul v'yosef apischad Rabbi Huda Barami. A kid could get burned out of learning too, right? There's a story with. I don't know if it's true. I give a disclaimer before, but I heard this story from a big mechanech in Lakewood. He said over that somebody came to the brisker Rav, and I heard it from one or two others. They said it's a true story. And he said, my son was mamish a moiridik a masmid, and he came 21. He just stopped learning. When he was 15, 16, 14, 13. So they say, the brisker Rav says, wenn et gedacht spillen hat gelernt. Yes, was darf lernen, spielte. Right? In other words, kids could get burned out. So could there be something positive about taking children or grandchildren to a game?
Okay, even though that wasn't the situation that existed over there with the game I went to, but in Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael Dike Mechanech came to me. He's a mechanech in a cheder, and he's born and bred Israeli. And he said somehow he got to see that clip, and he told me that he brought it to his mechanechim. He's a Menahel. He brought it to the mechanechim. I said, what do you say about this? And this one said, what's a Rav doing, a Haredi Rav doing there, whatever. He said, no. He said, L'maisa, if a child needs that, here is a grandfather giving his child what they need at that time. That's the biggest chinuch. That's what he said. For an Israeli mechanech, a Menahel in a Haredi cheder, to understand that, so you have his okay to what you're asking me. Rabbi Yaakov Horowitz, who works with children off the derech, he wrote me an email, and he said if more grandparents would go out of their comfort zone to accommodate their grandchildren, I would have less work to do. That was very heartwarming. But that really wasn't the Matisyahu there. The Matisyahu was that in Scotland at the time, the Israeli soccer team was coming to play Scotland in some important match. And the whole community was going to show identity with Israel, which in Scotland is identifying with Yiddishkeit. So the Rav of the shul went. He's a Ger Chosid, a Choshev Rav. He went with his kehillah. They all went in buses as a kehillah. And my son-in-law and daughter are were chaplains for the entire university system in Scotland, mitzad the rabbinate of the UK. And he had students that they were taking also to this game as identifying with Israel and with Yiddishkeit or whatever. And they were taking their children with them. And this was the last night that we were visiting them in Scotland. And my grandchildren had a conflict. On the one hand, they really wanted to go to this game. I don't think they've ever been to a soccer game. And the whole kahila was going. And on the other hand, Bobby and Zabi, which was the last night that they were there, and they didn't want to leave us, didn't feel that was, covered for their grandparents. My oldest grandchild was at the time 9 years old. So I told them, look, I'll solve your problem. I'll go there, and I'm really not interested in soccer, but I'll bring a sefer with me, and I'll learn, and I'll be there with you the night. You don't have to worry about the fact that you're leaving us. And that's what happened. And I was learning there, and until the Israelis made a goal, and there was a lot of noise, and I looked up for a second, they caught me on Scottish TV. And the person who was the narrator of the TV program said, wow, here's somebody who's totally oblivious of what's going on. Must be a good read. And that went viral over the whole world, which taught me that, Ozen Ayin Roev, Ozen Shomas, nothing you can do in this world anymore that's private. And Lamaisa, many people said, what a Kiddush Hashem. I don't know what a Kiddush Hashem is to learn by a soccer game. You want to see people learning, go to a Beis Medrash, you'll see bigger Kiddush Hashem. But maybe it was a Kiddush Hashem insofar that it's possible that somebody's more interested in Torah than interested in soccer games. I think that's what amazed these people, these goyim. And Lamaisa, though, the fact that it would be televised in Eretz Yisrael, where it has implications, like you said, it depends on the time and the place and what the implications are. That for sure was not a positive thing. As my son-in-law even said, what if a 15-year-old in Eretz Yisrael who doesn't have problems, who doesn't need to go to a soccer game? But he says, but Rabbi Leff was at a soccer game, how come I can't go? So that's not a problem, what to tell such a child. So you don't do that in a place where it has implications, where it's not a proper thing to do. In Scotland, and under the circumstances, I didn't see anything wrong with it. But again, in Eretz Yisrael, it's a different story. So it really depends on what the message is and what the situation and circumstances, like you said, where the Maramshik circumstances were different than the Chassam Sofer's, and what could be 100% mutter mitzad hadin, but mitzad the circumstances could become 100% awesome.
Yeah.
Depends on the circumstances. There's a famous Maisa with the Chazon Ish, that when they started the Chinuch Atzmoi schools, so they had to decide what language they would teach in the Chinuch Atzmoi schools. They went to the Chazon Ish, and he said in modern Hebrew, and that's talking about the Yaakovs and the Chinuch Atzmoi, teach in Hebrew, in regular spoken Hebrew. So they wanted to put the Chazon Ish in Cherem, because Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, the Yishuv HaYoshem, made a Mulchemes mitzvah against speaking Ivrit. They called it Ivrit with two vavs, the blind language. So they asked the Chazon Ish, how you talking? He said, Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld was fighting a war with people who grew up in frum homes and were pulled away by secular Zionism and told that in Eretz Yisrael, you don't need mitzvahs. All you need is to live in Israel and speak Hebrew, and that gives you enough of a Jewish identity. And they had to fight that. So they said, we're not even going to speak your language. So on the other hand, the Chazon Ish said, today we lost that battle. We're dealing with people who don't need Hebrew as a substitute for Torah. They don't know what Torah is. And if we don't speak their language, we don't teach in the vernacular that's used in the country, we're going to lose another generation. The situation is different. And therefore, he gave a marshal. He said, if you had a general in World War I who was an excellent strategist, and he went into retirement, and now it's World War II. You take him out of World War II and you ask him to give you a strategy for an air battle. And he gives you a strategy that is good for box planes, put him back in retirement. It's a different war, different battle. You need different kalim. Avali, it's the generals like the Chazon Ish who decides what the war is and what the battle is and what the kalim are. But you see that, just like you said, with the Chassam Sofer and the Maram Shik, when the situation changes, So then the halacha may change. What may be 100% mutter in one place at one time, where there are no implications, where the situation is different, maybe 100% usher in another place where the implications are different.
And what do you say? Moshe has a tshuva where he calls a baseball stadium a Moshav Leitzim. Do you understand that?
Yeah, if Moshav Leitzim, there's a shaila why it's a Moshav Leitzim, why the Gemara says in Avodah Zarah those kinds of things. There's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, Shnayim sheyoshvim bein b'neim divrei Torah is a Moshav Leitzim. So some of Farshim learn because they're not learning. They could be learning, they're not. And the Torah, the absence of Torah is be'etzem a Moshav Leitzim. But others learn no. It's just the fact that they wouldn't be learning. So sometimes the people don't learn. That doesn't become a Moshav Leitzim. It may be Bikkur Torah, it may not be Bikkur Torah, it depends on the situation. But here they're doing it, they're sitting together, and they're bedavka not learning with each other. Ein beinayim, that's Leitzonis. That's the Leitzonis. So you see that some hold that just a place where it's the absence of Limud HaTorah, and it's a different kind of entertainment, that be'etzem is a Moshav Leitzim. And others hold, no, there has to be something more there that creates Leitzonis. It's Mitzlotzim. And it seems like the Meforshei Gemara over there, the Achronim and the Gemara Avodah Zarah, some say that it's just because of the Bikkur Torah aspect that makes it a Moshav Leitzim. It's an entertainment that's not Torah. And some say that it's because those things, there was something intrinsically Leitzonis about them, scoffing or whatever. And that leads a person to not only not to be learning Torah, but to be critical of Torah and critical of Torah ideals. So it depends. A baseball game in America, I don't think has some kind of intrinsic reason why it's Leitzonis. On the other hand, it's for sure an entertainment that's not Divrei Torah. If it's a second thing, then there are times that a person needs an outlet, needs some kind of entertainment or whatever, and bitula hikiyuma. If it's the first kind of thing, that it's a place, mamish, where it's anti-Torah values or whatever, and a real Leitzonis kind of thing, which could be in certain sports or whatever, there is such a thing like that. Then it's a different story. Then it has that implications no matter what, even if it won't lead to Bikkur Torah. Nobody has a business being there, even if they're learning Torah. But it really depends on the nature of the sport and the place where it's being played. And again, knowing for the few times that I was in a baseball game in America, didn't seem to be the intrinsic kind of Leitzonis, but the more passive kind of Leitzonis, that it just was an entertainment that was not the Limud HaTorah.
Rabbi Zev, Agresi Ashikayach, thank you so much. It's always an honor to have you with us.
Okay, it's an honor to be on your program.
Khal.
Okay, thank you.
We have on the phone with us Harav Mordechai Becher, a famous lecturer for gateways, a noted, respected, fascinating lecturer. I've heard him many times. He's also a Rebbe in Yeshiva University. Welcome, Rabbi Becher.
Thank you very much for having me. Pleasure to speak with you.
So, exercise and playing sports. In America, it's become sort of accepted, I think. The vast majority of yeshivas, I can't speak for Chassidish yeshivas, allow their children to do both exercise, sports, etc. But in Eretz Yisrael, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess they hold it's both Bittul Torah, right, as well as I don't know, maybe Darkei Mirayi. What's your opinion? Give us some thoughts on that.
Well, I think part of it, at least in Eretz Yisrael, is because of the old battles with secular Zionism. You know, Max Nordau, one of the early leaders of Zionism in 1898, when they opened a gymnastic club in Berlin, which was called the Bar Kochva Club, he wrote an essay called Jury of Muscle. He says, we want to go back to a glorious past where the Jewish, in which a hero like Bar Kochva refused to know defeat. When in the end victory eluded him, he knew how to die. Bar Kokhba was the last embodiment in world history of a bellicose, militant Jew. Sha'ar in 1916, that was a very left-wing secular Zionist organization. So they also basically said, we want to put an end to the idolatrous worship of books, which is typical of us. Everything we say gives off the odor of mold on worn-out pages. Our ideal is a young Jew with strong body and courageous spirit, whose thoughts are healthy and normal, not hair-splitting and sophisticated. So that type of attitude, which was not uncommon amongst the secular Zionists, I think created, combined also with the fact that soccer games in Israel are heavily attended, often usually involve Chilul Shabbos, and consequently, it became part of, I think, the battleground between the frum world and the secular world in Israel. In America, Australia, Canada, you don't really have that type of background, so people don't look at it with the same negativity. However, having said that, I think that I do know that in a lot of schools, frum schools in the United States, they don't really have organized sports class like we used to have in school in Australia. Swimming lessons were part of the school curriculum. Cricket was part of the school curriculum. They don't have that. You know, kids do have games at recess, but unfortunately, I think they don't really have organized sports. I think that's a problem. You know, as you know, the Rambam says in Hilchos Deis that Yasim Liba Shea Gufay Shalom B'Chazak. You know, you should be strong. You should be complete. He says Darchei Avoda Imorin Avuchim. I think it's in the sources I sent, but in Chelek Gimel Chaf Hey, he actually mentions exercise. And he says if you're doing it for the right reason, you're doing exercise. He even mentions dancing. Hard to see that as exercise, but I guess, whatever. He says if you're doing it for the reason of making your body stronger, to help your digestion, to be a healthy person, then it's Avodas Hashem. So I don't think there's enough of a recognition of the need for it, especially for little kids to let out energy. And you are correct that in the Hasidic schools it's not done much at all. I think that's a bit of a problem. You know, we do have a bit of a health problem in the frum community in terms of weight, in terms of lack of exercise, and I think this is something which the Torah obligates us to do. You know, there's Rav Samson Raphael Hirsch points out, you know, there's a Mishnah, the Mishnah in Kiddushin, which in Chaf Tes, which says that the Ha'av Chayiv Lamed B'noi Lamula, he has to circumcise and liftoiso, to do pidyon haben, to teach him Torah, to find him a wife, to teach him a trade. Yesh oimrim afla hashitoi b'mayim. Some say you have to teach him how to swim. So in Chorev, Rav Hirsch, when he talks about the obligation of education in chapter 84 of Mitzvahs, so Rav Hirsch there says that one of the obligations is to give your child physical powers. And I don't think it's bittul Torah. You know, there's interesting, one of my favorite taz in Shulchan, I mean, not a lot of favorite tazes, but it's a taz in Even HaEzer, you must be familiar with, where he quotes a posuk, says, Shav lachem mashkimei kum, posuk in Tehillim. It is useless for you to get up early, a teenager's favorite posuk. But the Taz explains what that means is you could have a Talmid Chacham who doesn't sleep much. Yeah, it's by on 5 hours sleep. Another Talmid Chacham is jealous because this Talmid Chacham needs 7 hours sleep to function. So he figures, I know I'm going to sleep 2 hours less, and I will now have the equivalent time of learning as this other Talmid Chacham. So the Taz says on that, the Pasuk says Shav lachem. It's useless. Why? Because if your body actually needs that, then you will be learning less efficiently during those extra 2 hours if you would have slept the amount of time you need to sleep. And instead of causing yourself pain, you'd learn that much more efficiently, and you wouldn't lose out. So I think the Taz.
You know, our Sameach added on to that Taz. He said, he was asked that question by a boy in yeshiva: should he learn 13 hours? Should he sleep 6 hours, 7 hours, 5 hours? So Sameach quoted the Taz, and he said, if you sleep 6 hours and you only needed 5, you have an hour of Bithul Torah. But if you sleep 6 and you really needed 8, you'll have 13 hours of Bithul Torah.
Oh, exactly. And I think the same could be applied. There are the schools that feel having a sports class or an hour during the day or something like that, in which there's organized athletic activities in which all the kids are involved in something, and I exclude from that baseball, but that is not, that in accordance with the Taz, it's not Bittul Torah. That's the case where the kids will be able to learn better. There's no question that will increase their health and increase their ability to focus during the time they're in class. And also, this is not a Torah source, but in the field of positive psychology, Tal Ben Sha'ar, in his book Happier, Martin Seligman, Sonia Lyubomirsky, there's been extensive research on the effects of exercise on happiness. It reduces anxiety and stress. It protects from disease. It protects against cognitive impairment, helps control weight, makes you feel in control of yourself, improves self-esteem, gives you a time out from stress. It improves your physical abilities, which increases happiness, and it's legal drugs that you produce yourself, not in your basement, but in your brain. Serotonin, endorphins, and they actually, literally, on a physical level, make you feel happier and better. So just in terms of that a person should be happy and a person should be independent, I think it's, and I know from my own Rebbe, Rav Moshe Shapiro, Oliver Sholem, he used to go swimming a few times a week at Kiryat HaNoar in Bayit V'Gam, but it doesn't matter where. But he used to swim regularly when he was healthier. I believe that Rabbi J.J. Schachter has a fantastic article this last Pesach, and he does have sources for this. But he says that apparently Reb Chaim Soloveitchik used to engage in exercise with his students, like sparring, boxing. The Alter of Novardok. And used to do some wrestling when he was a young man in Riga. With Yaakov Kamenetsky he was known as the best swimmer in Lomz. I'm not exactly sure what that means. I don't know how high the bar is there. But nevertheless, right, they did engage in activities. There's a fantastic Igeris of the Chazon Ish, Torah Lamed Hay, where there's clearly a yeshiva bacher who was experiencing burnout. And the Chazon Ish tells him, listen, you need to take some time off. You need to take about 2 weeks off, be marbe in things which are healthy and devarim b'teilim. But it's a fascinating letter. But the beginning 2 lines of the letter, I think, is very interesting. The first 2 lines, he says, Dalacha Yekiri, no, my dear one, she'ein kam lo chet v'lo ashma, there's no sin, there's no guilt. Rak mechukei hateva lehit ayef, it is a law of nature to become tired and weary. Ein ra'ui lezalzel b'chukei hateva, it's not appropriate to treat the laws of nature lightly. That is a great statement, and that's something which we have to certainly take into account. There's a famous Igros Moshe who was writing about I think it was a school was in Israel, perhaps, Chinuch Hatzmoi, in Israel. Igros Moshe and Eben Ezer Dalet Samach Aleph, where he was asked about, they wanted to build a pool. And it literally, he doesn't understand why they're even asking. He says, you're going to have appropriate supervision in terms of both in safety and in terms of, arayas, mixed swimming, and so you'll have appropriate supervision. What's the question? You're doing a chesed to the children. Just that they'll be able to enjoy, cool down for the summer, have exercise, etc., have greater strength to learn Torah after they engage in these activities.
What do you believe about contact sports? The kids want to play contact football where somebody could get hurt. Yeah. You mentioned Reb Chaim used to do boxing. I mean, there's an issa to be chayvel b'chaverei. How did Reb Chaim, you say, do boxing with the boys when there's an issa of chayvel?
Yeah, that is a good question. There are sports which are more dangerous than others, specifically, as you mentioned, contact sports like boxing, like martial arts, etc. First and foremost, being chayvel in someone, injuring someone. So in the Rambam, when he talks in chayvel or mazik, Perek Hey, first of all he says that it's also to be chayvel derech nitzayon harei ze'oiv b'loi saseh. And it's very interesting. He adds in that the chavola is if it's derech nitzayon, meaning it's in a destructive manner. It's not for a positive purpose. That is first thing to point out. Also, as the Gemara, Mishnah, Gemara and Bava Kama, Tzadik Aleph and Tzadik Beis, they say that if you are moichel, you have the ability to be moichel on a temporary damage, temporary pain, temporary injury. True, not on a permanent injury, but on temporary injury, I have the right to be moichel. There's a very interesting Tshuvas HaRosh, Khal Kuf Aleph, where he talks about two men who are wrestling. One of them throws the other guy to the ground, caused him to go blind in one eye. Now, normally we know that Adam Muad L'Olam, Ben Mezid, Ben Shogeg, etc., and even Oynes, but the Rosh says, and this is also a Toisus in Bava Kama, that Oynes Gamur, a complete and total Oynes, is not included in that chiyuv. Now he says, since when they're wrestling, it's impossible to hold back to the extent that you will not cause any damage. So he felt that there was no isur and there was no chiyuv to pay. He was talking really about the chiyuv to pay the guy for the fact that he became blind in one eye.
What was the case there?
The case was two men who were wrestling, and one threw the other to the ground, and as a result of the throwing him to the ground, he caused him to go blind in one eye. And the Rosh said he's not mechuyev in tashlumim for that, because he says it's an oynes gomor. Now the Beis Yosef quotes this in Choshen Mishpat, in Tavchaf Aleph, and he says that it could be that the Rosh is talking about a case where they were both moichel each other. If they're both moichel each other and it's an oynes gomor, then there's no chiyuv tashlumim. And I remember I actually asked Rav Scheinberg about this, Rav Chaim Pinchas Scheinberg, because a friend of mine and I used to actually do martial arts together, in which we wore gloves and protective gear, but we do occasionally hurt each other. Him hurt me more than the other way around, but nevertheless, I don't hold it against him. And we asked Rav Scheinberg, he referred to this Rosh, and he said if you moichel each other ahead of time and there's a low risk of permanent injury, then he says it's mutter, it's okay. If you actually the Igros Moshe in a tshuva written to I don't know who, but it's someone who wanted to know, is he allowed to play professional football, American football, professional so-called football, American football as a profession? Is it mutter? So,
but I think that's very different. I think we're conflating two issues, because when somebody's doing it for parnasa, there's a halacha of oila be'ila and oila be'keves, that you're allowed to put yourself. Look, a lot of what we do for parnasa is dangerous. I mean, people fly, to strange parts of the world. If somebody's a window washer, if somebody's a farmer. I mean, tractors. More people get killed every year. Tractors. So we have clearly both in the Shulchan Aruch, Rishonim, Chazal, that if you're doing it to earn a living, earning a living is a difficult thing. But we're talking about recreational sports. What I'm understanding about the rush is, how could you say it's an Einus Gomer when two people are wrestling and one guy gets hurt? That's an Einus?
So what he says is that the Oynes that the Rosh says is that it's efshalat samseim or kaven shiapilehu benachas. It's impossible for, if they're both agree, and this is how the Beis Yosef understands it, since they both agree to do this, there's a mechila on each part. And
but mechila is very controversial by mechila on there's a big body of Rishonim that say it's not yours to be moichel. You can't be chayvel in yourself.
Yes, so you can be moichel on pain, and be moicheling on pain or a temporary damage. That would be allowed. But
what about if it's a black and blue mark? I mean, even if it's still an isachava, chayvel b'chaver is a lav if you cause the person.
First of all, the lav is only, as the Rambam says, if it's derech mitzayon. If the intent is to either instruct a person in self-defense, or the intention is parnasa, or the intention is something of a positive nature, that's not called derech mitzayon. And I don't think it's just recreation. You're right. Just recreation is not exactly the same as the Igros Moshe when he talks about playing football as a parnasa. Parnasa has a special thing. Elav hu noisa es nafsho. He gives his very soul for it, etc. You're right. However, right, there's a level. It's not either parnasa or recreation. I think there's levels in between which are closer to parnasa than recreation. Right, the engaging in health, and as you know, the Rambam actually says in his Michtovim on health, he says the best exercise to do is exercise which is enjoyable and recreation, and which means that there is something to be said it may not be parnasa, but it might be the equivalent of parnasa, and I think it really is. Certainly, if there's the idea of self-defense involved, if there's an idea of a physical skill, if it's something which is going to help you become a healthier person, that's at least the equivalent of parnasa. What level of danger? What level of risk? So, we know from Poskim in Rabbi Akiva Eiger in Shuvas in Samach and the Magen Avraham in Orach Chaim, Shin Tez Zayin, he actually says that the level of risk of less than 1/1,000 is okay. So so if it's a sport where there's less than 1 in 1,000 risk, it's difficult to estimate. But my son did some research. He wanted to go skydiving. He found that the risk of injury or death is much less than 1 in 1,000. Right. I still didn't want him to go. Of course, now he's in the paratroopers in Israel, so he's doing skydiving anyway. But that's for Dvar Mitzvah.
Okay, but let me just go back. The Rambam, who says that it has to be sort of, I guess, in a malicious or in a damaging manner, is one opinion. Taisus and Baba Kama Daf Tzarkadik Aleph disagrees with the Rambam. So I'm saying it's a disputed opinion. It's not right?
That is true. But even according to Taisus, right, if it appears that Taisus seems to agree, Taisus in Chav Zayin seems to agree with the Rosh that an Oines Gamor Loy Rabbi Rachmana, and the base Yosef would say that if they're both moichel each other ahead of time, which is also what the Igros Moshe says, then there will be no Isser. And certainly if there's no intention to cause permanent damage and it's a low probability of permanent damage, then that would be okay. Obviously, now with research that has come out recently,
Taisus doesn't differentiate between permanent damage or not.
No, he doesn't.
Isha Shatafchas Reisha is still going to be an Isser, even though she's clearly Michael herself. She's doing it to herself, so it doesn't matter, right? I'm just saying
true.
It's
right. Yeah. You're right. It is a machlokas Rishonim from Beis Yosef and the Rosh, and also from the Igros Moshe. It appears that if it's a case where they're moichel each other, and if it's a low risk of permanent damage, then it would be okay. It would be mutter. I think, however, one more point is that recent research, past few years, has shown concussion injuries to be very serious from contact football. So I think, especially with kids, it would be irresponsible to allow them to engage in actual tackle football. They can get the same amount of exercise with, what are you Americans, touch football, flag football, something like that. They could get the equivalent amount of exercise engaged in that as they would with tackle football. So I don't think, I would agree, I don't think that we should encourage kids to be playing tackle football, or teenagers, or even adults. Unless, it's in the rare case that it's for parnasa. I mean, I happen to also think that nowadays, given the position, the amount of anti-Semitism and so on and so forth, it might be actually included under la hashitoi benahar, teaching how to swim, could be that teaching self-defense might be included in survival skills, the way Rav Hirsch seems to understand them.
So let's talk about going to ball games, going to sporting events. What? Oh.
So here, I'm afraid, I actually looking into that, and it appears to be problematic. First of all, the Gemara, famous Gemara in Avodah Zarah, Ha'holech Stadion or Lecharkom, Rasham, it's actually considered Moshav Leitzim. What is its stadion? So its stadion actually comes from the Greek word stadius, which is a 202-yard measure for foot or chariot races. So its stadion was where there were a lot of foot and chariot races. It also is related to a Greek word meaning a place of destruction. So it probably was also where there were gladiatorial games going on, in which there was actual shvichus domim. In these classic cases, there was also avodah zarah, and there was also gilui arayos. Charkom is an oval or a round arena, comes from the Latin for circle. And so these are, the Gemara says absolutely also. It also talks about kanigion, which is a hunt or an animal, a contest, etc. These are all osir. And Shulchan Aruch talks about the Hilchos Shabbos, the Magen Avraham, about going to these type of events as being, Chukas Ha'akum, and also, at the very least, Moshav Leitzim. One more point, which the Mishnah Berurah makes in Hilchos Brachos, in Siman Reish Chaf Daled, the Mishnah Berurah quotes a Bach in the name of the Eshkol, who says that to go and see to places where Kusiyim are rejoicing, and to be part of the Simcha, he says, if you hear them, Smeichim ta'aneach v'titza'er al churban Yerushalayim v'tispal HaKadosh Baruch Hu aleiha. He says that he says a person shouldn't be engaged in if he does hear them celebrating, he should be crying about Churban Yerushalayim with all Rabbi Akiva. And it says also, he quotes the Gemara that says to go to Kinigios Tetroi Shel Yisrael is Moshav Leitzim. Now, there is an Igros Moshe who discusses this.
But before the Igros Moshe, it's very likely that the Roman amphitheaters, what went on over there, is very different than a ball game. I mean, they fed people to lions.
Agreed.
100%. Gladiators killed each other. Now, notwithstanding the fact that Boston and New York, or the Yankees and the Mets, hate each other, they're not feeding them to lions. There's nothing bloodthirsty going on.
Right.
There's no avodah zarah. So, are we comparing apples to oranges? And certainly. And for example, it's an Issa Moshav Leitzim. I mean, there's not a lot of comedy going on here.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of I saw this most.
On the team, but yes. Right.
I saw this. To me, it was a very strange tshuva from Rabbi Zilberstein. He was asked, "Can you make a minyan in a base cafe if somebody was in like a Starbucks, I guess." And he needed to make a minyan, and it was within the year he had to say Kaddish. So he writes, you absolutely can't, because everybody knows it's a Moshav Leitzim. Now, I think that most Americans would be very surprised, especially those sitting on their computers, would be very surprised there that there's something very, maybe a comedy club is a Moshav Leitzim. I don't know what Litzanis goes on at a Starbucks. So how would you? I'm curious. What's your feeling about that?
Two things. I think your distinction is historically correct. We don't have. There's no shvichus domim, at least unintentional, or avodah zarah taking place at sports games. I think there is some level of gilei arayos depending on the game, in the sense of where the cheerleaders, etc., halftime shows. I think that's a serious issue. But let's
get back to that, because that's a very important point. Let's talk about a baseball game.
Yeah, which I've never been to, but okay.
Well, there are no cheerleaders, and there's no shvichas damim.
You're right. It's a side point.
Most of the players look quite overweight, and there's nothing particularly exerting going on over there. Certainly no shvichas damim or gilei arayos.
Correct. So you're right. So again, I think there's two distinctions, and I think Moshe makes these distinctions. At least one of the distinctions is that first of all, the games that we have today have no involvement. They're not chukas ha'akum. That's one of the things he points out. That it's not chukas ha'akum, because they're not done l'shem avodah zarah. And it's unclear they're even a chok of shtus v'hevel. There's a logic behind them. There's a reason behind them. There's no relationship to avodah zarah. Hence, the isser of chukas ha'akum and the isser of l'saper b'shvachon shaloif dekachavim. It's unclear that it applies because there's no chukas ha'akum doesn't apply here according to Rabbi Moshe, and it appears according to Moshe Shonim it wouldn't apply. A second issue is that the non-Jews amongst whom we live. So, first of all, there is the opinion of the Meiri in a number of places who says that an oved avodah zarah of the type that is prohibited to sit with, to praise, etc., is only those she'enam gedurim b'darkei hadasos. They're not bound by religious precepts, meaning Muslims and Christians he does not consider to be ovdei kochavim u'mazolos. I have on the authority of first of all, Rabbi Shapiro, Oliver Shalom, who said that he did not believe the Meiri was writing this as apologetica. He believed the Meiri really believed this.
Well, the Meiri writes it in around 19 different places in the Becher.
Yes.
So if it's apologetica, he certainly went out of his way to do it.
Exactly, and also heard the same idea from Yibal L'chaim Professor David Berger, who's an expert in Jewish-Christian polemics, also believed that it was not apologetica. So that is one. That's one issue.
Yeah, but Rabbi Becher, let's be fair. The Meiri is an outlier shita. It is not accepted by anybody, right? The Meiri says it legabe hezik. If you mazik a guy yechayev, he says it legabe yayin nesach. He says it 100 different halachas, which in Shulchan Aruch clearly is not. So the Meiri is just really a very outlier, one opinion out of, it's.
And also how outlying it is. In other words, even though
I can't think of it. There's not a single other Rishon who agrees with this Meiri.
Well, that's true. But even though we are machmir regarding things like stam yenam, we consider them to be Ovdei Avodah Zarah. That is true, and in virtually all halachos, that is true, right? However, you do find, for instance, Rav Eliezer Yehuda Voldenberg, the Tzitz Eliezer holds that they're not genuine Ovdei Avodah Zarah in the sense of the Isser of Matnas Chinam, Losachanim, etc. And that seems to be accepted by many of the Achronim.
Wait. But I didn't understand the Tzitz Eliezer that way, because the Shulchan Aruch says on the Isser of Losachanim, you're not allowed to give them a Matnas Chinam. But the Beis Yosef says it doesn't just go to Ovdei Avodah Zarah. It means any guy, even a Yishmaeli, who is not considered an Ovdei Avodah Zarah, and the Shach brings him over there in Kufnan Aleph. Right. He says that Kol Aved Khal Mashma, even a Yishmaeli, is only exception of a Ger Toshav. Okay. So the Isser of Losachanim would be even a non-idolater as long as he's Lana Ger Toshav. So the question is, this is accepted halacha. This is the Beis Yosef, the Shach, and nobody in Shulchan Aruch argues on this.
No, although the Ramah does say that if Mekavim b'shvacha lohodas HaKadosh Baruch Hu shabara bria noya kazu, then it would be mutar.
Well, the Gemara says the Gemara says that. The Gemara says, how could he say kama noy v'des kechavmus? He says it's just to be mishabech, and he says you can make a bracha actually. But if you're not doing, which by the way.
The Tzitz Eliezer does bring the Meiri as a sniff lahakel.
Okay.
And he does, I'm trying to find it here, but he also, it's a lengthy tshuva as usual, but I believe he also does say that if it's nothing to do with the dust of the akum and in general, then and you're praising it for nothing to do with that, then it could be that it's not included in the Isser.
Which is when you see, if you look at the Shulchan Aruch and the Lashon of Shulchan Aruch, I'm pulling it up. Asal saper b'shvachan afilu loimer kameno oived kechavim, which clearly has nothing to do with their das when you're saying that they're good looking, right? Kal v'chaymer she'saper b'shvach ma'asav oy she'chaviv davar midvar anything he said, right? So the Shulchan Aruch is much, which by the way leads us to an interesting question. People will say, okay, we're going to do a discussion. Can you say, wow, I love this particular baseball player or basketball player because of this problem of asal saper b'shvachan. So like you say, we're going to be parts of our audience that will be shaking their heads very sagely and saying, you're right, you shouldn't be a baseball fan. But what about the same group of people that just open up any of these newspapers, the Yated, the Hamodia, the Mishpacha, the Yid, pick your favorite one, and glowingly in the center, they have now deified and accepted, literally as a demigod, Donald Trump, right?
So I think
for all he's done for Israel. And how do you equate that with the Shulchan Aruch says asal l'saper b'shvachan, right? Kal v'chaymer she'saper b'shvach ma'asav. He's doing wonderful things for Israel, right?
On three things. If there's as the Tzitz Eliezer says, and all the posts can say, if there's a te'eles for yourself, if it's not matnas chinam, if there is some type of te'eles for you.
No. Wait, Yeah, but respectfully, I don't agree with that. I don't think that's a good comparison. There's two different halachas here. There's asal litein matnas chinam la'akam she'enei makirei. But if you're makir, in other words, if there's a benefit, you're allowed to give a matnas chinam.
Correct.
Right? That's one halacha. The asal l'saper b'shvachan is when the guy is not in front of you.
But
when you say,
same,
"Wow, that's a beautiful,"
it's the same core.
I understand, but here already you're not giving them anything. So what is this? Because of this extends, and this is saying we are creating an image of the concept of this this beautiful, perfect, idolater, which is problematic. In other words, we are creating heroes that are not part of our culture, and that's problematic. We now, like, what does Rabbeinu Yainu famously say? Ish lefi mahalalai. The people, I judge you by the people you praise. So the din of asal l'saper b'shvachan is when you're giving them nothing and they never even hear about it. So the fact that
I understand. There's a few things here. There is the Chaim Pelagi who holds that it's only if it's things which are. I know the Lashon of the Shulchan Aruch does not sound like that, but he says it's only if it's things which are nogeya to the avodah zarah of them. I know that's not the Lashon of the Shulchan Aruch, but
and what is that? The Gemara says. The Gemara says this is a beautiful woman. This has nothing to do with avodah zarah. When somebody sees a good-looking girl and he says that's beautiful, which is what the Gemara is talking about.
Avodah zarah, it might be related to that, and saying if there's no chivuv and there's no chivuv of the, if through that you're going to come closer to the avodah zarah, that's where the problem is. So he would say that in a case where it's not nogeya to that bichlal, that's one tzad of kula. There is also the idea that if there is an advantage...
but wait, I just want to point out that the Rishonim, and I'm sorry, the Poskim who says talking about even a non-Ovid avodah zarah, like a Yishmaeli, right, which the Shach held was not an Ovid avodah zarah, you have the exact same issa. So, Chaim Pelagi, but certainly, I'm quoting here the Be'er Heitiv, the Shach, the Beis Yosef, clearly don't learn that way.
Okay. The Te'elis they say you're getting from it is, again, some are soymech on the fact that if your kavana is to increase the person's own derech eretz or to increase my adherence to Torah through this, then it is, so to speak, included in miskaven b'shvach elohodos la'kadosh baruch hu. So I happen to agree that admiration for the sports player because of who he is wrong, but on the other hand, I think admiration of the person because, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, look at the wisdom he has given to people to create such amazing steroids, etc., is something which is okay, and especially since most of them, certainly. Most of them are not Christian or Muslim. The truth is they are zero in terms of religion. But certainly, if you rely on the Meiri, who is an outlier, but if the Tzitziliazim, it's sarf to that, the other issues, then that could be not also. I mean, certainly, it's not necessary going to the game. You could, going to the game and praising the person on two separate issues. A person could go to the game, enjoy it, and not engage in any praise.
So let's go back to going to the game.
Going to the game. So we were talking about the Moshav Leitzim issue or the Chukas Ha'akum issue. So Ramosh himself points out that there is no Chukas Ha'akum here. There's no connection whatsoever to that, as opposed to, let's say, the ancient Roman games or Greek theatre, etc., which was an act of propaganda for avodah zarah on the whole. But he does mention that there is a Moshav Leitzim issue. Now, what is Leitzonos? What is Leitzonos? Serve of Bittul Torah, he says, yes, okay. But what is Leitzonos? And you're right. How is it that a Starbucks is considered to be a Moshav Leitzim? Is getting a cup of coffee. So I think the definition of a late, at least the way the Maharal understands it, is someone who either degrades something which should be important, or the opposite of that is inflating something which should not be important to a level of importance. So avodah zarah, where the Gemara says, it's osur to be engaged in leitzanot except for avodah zarah. Right, that is because the Maharal says, because what is avodah zarah? It is the inflation of something beyond its due importance, beyond its actual power, to a point where it's exaggerated and hence becomes something that people worship. He says Leitzonos deflates that. What Leitzonos does is something which deflates something which is looked at as important and makes it not important. So that's why, for example, what is a Moshav Leitzim? Right, attending these games, attending the Charkum or the Itztadion or etc., is giving undue importance to something which is not important, and concurrently, I think that engaging in it instead of doing something else is really deflating the importance of other things. So in that
anything putting something out of context is Litzanis?
To a certain degree. If it's
increasing the first Litzanis we have, Litzanis in Chazal we have is Amalek, right? Let's Taki, or Pesiyarim. So it says, what did Amalek do? They took the Mila and they were Zayrik it Klape Mila. They made a joke. The Jews did Mila, they took their Arla and they threw it up in the air. They made Litzanis. Here you are. They threw it back to God. I mean, to say that, so if somebody's a very avid gardener and he spends way too much time gardening, has that become Litzanis?
Well, it may be. In other words, I don't know if it depends how much.
That Leff taking care of his roses or watering his lawn, is that Leff?
It's very difficult to give a definite amount. How many hours?
No, everybody would agree. He takes too much care of his lawn, so he now became a Leff?
I think there is an element of it in there. Yeah, Moshav Leitzim is when there's a whole group of people doing it together. And
so a bunch of guys taking care of their lawn would be a Moshav Leitzim, according to this?
I mean, if they're all doing a mowing crew together.
No disrespect to Mordechai, it sounds like Litzanis to me.
Look, again, the question is how far they take it. If it's taken as seriously as you would take some mitzvah or some aspect of Torah,
is going to a game taken as seriously as a mitzvah?
I don't think so, but I think Moshe Feinstein, when he says Moshav Leitzim, I think that's where he's coming from. I think what he's saying is that it's inflating this thing to the level of people's enthusiasm, the level of people's devotion to the teams, the level of people's devotion to the players, the level of people's interest in it. I think there might be a bit of a problem with that. And granted, America has not descended to the level of European soccer fans where there's literally shvichus domim on a regular basis. But the level of devotion that a Jew should have to Torah mitzvahs, etc., and the level of devotion that people have to teams, to games, etc., I find it a little disturbing. I can relate to what Reb Moshe is saying. I think, the team is not me. The team is irrelevant. The team doesn't care about me, aside from the fact that I play for
I think most people would say that who go, and I can't tell you, but I know, look, I grew up in America. I was a Yankee fan. I still occasionally, hear how they're doing, right? And it's a distraction. People live lives that are full of stress, and they need a distraction. In the olden days,
I agree.
It used to be countries went to war. Today they have football, baseball games, right? So I think it's a distraction, and it's a way to defrag and unplug. Now I would ask you.
Let me just say, I agree with that. I think that it's a question of degree. And it's a question of degree. If it's as a distraction, and if it's just to relax, etc., I don't think that.
Besides distraction, it's also
if it becomes an obsession and it's central.
But I think for most people, I think that's the exception. Patriot fans and Boston fans, but I think for most people it's a distraction. Would you say so? You're not pro going to, let's say, a baseball game?
No. Let me wait. One thing at a time. I was explaining what Moshe Feinstein seems to say, that it's considered Moshav Leitzim. Right? I'm not absolutely certain that I haven't asked anyone about this, so I don't know what Gedolim today would say. I think it's a question of degree, how often you go, what the level of intensity is, what the level of obsession is. You can learn things from these games. I heard many talks by Rabbi Matisyahu, who's the Rosh Hashiva of Or Sameach. I don't remember a single talk where he didn't mention some analogy from baseball. And guys love that. Rav Aaron Lichtenstein used to use sports analogies in his shiurim. There is certainly, I think, a value to it. I think relaxation and leisure has a place.
Now, would you take the same position, Rabbi Becher?
Not.
Rabbi, what would you feel about a football game or a basketball game where you have cheerleaders and I think preachers is a much bigger part of the game than it would be a baseball game.
I think that's a problem. The truth is, that's not a sports issue. That's a problem in going to the mall. That's a problem in society as a whole. It's not exclusive to sports. Halavai would only be in the stadium. But that's a general issue. I want to, it's interesting. You look at the Ramchal. We're talking about balance here, and I think that's really the issue is what's the level of balance. That Reb Moshe Feinstein doesn't really discuss that in the Tshuva. But I think the level of balance from when something being a distraction on one end of the scale and an obsession on the other end of the scale, when it's close to the end of the scale of obsession, then it becomes, I think, classic Moshav Leitzim. If it's on the level of distraction, etc., then probably not. Are there other side issues which come up? Yes, they have to be dealt with. But I think you look at the Ramchal when he talks about in Perek Tes in Mesilas Yesharim. He says that the Arai component has to be in Yonei Ha'olam, that which is temporary and less important, and that which is important and Kavua has to be in Yonei Avoda. But he says at the end of the day, he says the person has to be balanced about it and has to understand what is correct, what is not correct. And I think to a certain degree, these things are very much depend on the individual. There's a great article by Rabbi J.J. Sha'ar called "The Importance of Leisure." It's in the YU Pesach to Go 5779, actually this year's. And he does point out that from a psychological perspective, people do need leisure. You look at the Rambam in Shmoina Prakim, I don't think he quotes this, but the Rambam in Shmoina Prakim, he says that if a person's feeling depressed, they should go and take a walk in a beautiful area, listen to good music, take time with friends, maybe spend money on good food. This is stuff which is necessary. I mean, it's not the type of thing you should do on a regular basis. You won't have any money left, but it is something that is, I think, an authentic human need. And I think a mild support for a team in which I feel happy because, and on the contrary, if the team is from my city, there is an idea of the Chonan Wasserman, I think it is, who points it out since the Istato Baraisa or Bari Alma, Hashem looked, so it says the reason I feel an affinity and a loyalty to my city, to Melbourne, and I'm happy when Melbourne defeats Sydney in any area, which it usually does. So that is because there's a halacha that aniye ircha koidmin. I have so that's embedded in the nature of the world. So it's not a bad thing to feel joy when the team of your hometown defeats the team of another hometown. The question is how far you take it, and that's really where it really becomes like what the Kuzari says, which is that his beautiful lashon, Lo azav echad me'elu hakoiches v'ha'ivorim sheyirba b'mashu meyuchad boy v'yafchis hanisharim. He doesn't allow any area of his body or his mind to have more than what it needs, and hence take away from the other needs, or have less than what it needs and give more to other aspects. A person has to know, right, kitza, tnua, maisa ha'olam, etc., has to be balanced. So it is true that Reb Moshe says it's Moshav Leitzim. Is every baseball game a Moshav Leitzim? If you go to a minor league game, or if you go to Yidel League, the kids play baseball in Passaic from kids, I don't think he would say that's a Moshav Leitzim. But, that's a little bit of a different level.
Rabbi Becher, thank you very much. It's a pleasure having you on.
My pleasure and honor. Thank you so much.
We have the honor of having with us on the phone from Yerushalayim, Reb Shea Chaitofsky. He's the Menahel of the Chutz La'aretz program of Torah. He's also an Einikal of Rav Scheinberg Zechariah Levracha. Welcome, Reb Shea.
Shalom Aleichem.
So, Reb Shea, your grandfather was an American born and bred.
I want to correct that. He was born in Poland.
Oh.
And see, what happened was his father ran away from Europe, from Poland, in order not to be inducted in the Polish army. So he ran to America, and then the First World War broke out. He was not able to bring his family over till after the First World War. So my Rav Scheinberg was born in 1910 in Poland, Ostrov in Poland, and did not see his father for the first time until 9 years later. When he was 9 years old in 1919, he came to America, and he saw his father for the first time. So he grew up, from the age of 9, he went to school. I mean, it's an interesting story. He went to public school, because that's what people usually went. And as Rabbi Scheinberg told us in a Hanukkah Mesiba, a few months after he went to public school, a few Italians knocked him out and threw him downstairs. And they called his father in, and his father saw this and said, I did not bring him to America for this. And he took him out and he put him in RJJ, which was a yeshiva school. And he said that was the miracle of my life, that the Italians started up with me and knocked me out. Who knows what would have happened with me if I stayed in public school. So that was an unbelievable story of Rabbi Scheinberg. And he was, a regular yeshiva boy, and I just, he liked sports. He played a good game of baseball. He was called Lefty Scheinberg. He was a lefty. It's interesting that he put on tefillin as a righty because they taught him in Europe to write with his right hand. That was usual in those days. They thought it's a curse if you're a lefty and you write lefty. So he wrote with his right hand, even though he threw with his left hand. And according to Halacha, the tefillin goes according to how you write. So that's why he put on as a righty. But he was a lefty. He threw a ball with a lefty. He was a very good pitcher. And Rabbi Herman, saw a lot of boys playing ball a lot. We're talking about Nassim Wachtvogel and a few others. And he felt that they're playing too much ball, and he got together with these boys, Rabbi Herman, to learn with them Ein Yaakov and Mesilas Yesharim, and he put the love of Torah into them. And they became tremendous people. Later on, Rabbi Kaplan, who later started the Beis Yaakov in America. So these were all Talmidim of Rabbi Herman, who after school learned with them and really made great people out of them.
Fabulous. Now, is it true that your grandfather was a baseball fan, a Yankee fan?
It is true. I even remember in his later years, he once met when he was in Miami. So he met. It was an interesting story. He was we're talking about the middle '90s, and he was in Miami, and where we were staying. So there was the balabas of the house had a friend. A woman who was married to a famous baseball player that was on the Mets and the Yankees, and so she came to get a bracha. And I remember when he came in and introduced himself, so he said, "No, did the Yankees win the World Series?" So everyone laughed in the room, but it was very interesting. So this pitcher, I'm trying to remember his name. He was a famous pitcher of the Mets, and then he became a pitcher for the Yankees, and he was in the crossroads because he played that year, and he asked if he could ask a question to my grandfather. So I said, why not? So he said he wanted to know, should he keep on playing ball or should he retire and do something else? So I was thinking to myself, what in the world is Rabbi Scheinberg going to tell him? So he said, you only do something if you like doing it. If you want to continue playing because you love playing, then you should continue. But if you're only thinking about the money, that's not a reason to continue. You can make money other ways.
Wow.
I couldn't believe it. He was astounded on that answer. And
I'm also astounded because, to be honest, what this guy makes playing ball, he's not going to make tending bar, which is what most of these guys, let's face it, that's their talent set.
But you're right. But like she was outside, prognosis from Hashem, and you don't know what happens to people, and he just felt it's like the Gemara in the end of Kedushin. You do something that you like doing.
Right.
So if he's after the time, we're talking about the 41, I forgot exactly the age, and Al Leiter. Now I remember the name of the pitcher, Al Leiter.
Was he Jewish?
And no, his wife was Jewish. That's very interesting. His wife was Jewish and a friend, of course not religious, and a friend of the one that we stayed by. So they were a next door neighbor. So they were intrigued that so many people were coming to get brachas from Rabbi Scheinberg. So she was invited by her friend to come in, and of course he was very intrigued. And then he got the courage to ask a question, and he said he couldn't believe that the rabbi had such insight.
And what did he do in the end? What did this fellow do?
He quit. He went to ESPN.
Oh,
so he stopped playing, and it was just very, very interesting. So
did you ever ask your grandfather, is there anything wrong with being a Yankee fan? Hashkafically, I mean, he was a gadol hador. Did you ask him? Is it healthy? Is it unhealthy? Did I go into any of the hashkaf or halacha Shabbai?
I tell you, he once said a shmooze, and he said that it's very hard to get rid of things that you had as a youth. And an example he said was, a baseball fan. He says I, was like all the other boys, and till today, as someone told, I don't know if it's 100%, but in his 90s, he said, someone told me he made a kiddush that he said it doesn't bother him anymore if the Yankees win or lose. But no, he was giving a shmooze, saying that it's very hard to get rid of things that were ingrained in the person when he was young.
But my question is, do you think there's anything wrong with it? Is it a healthy outlet? Should we be taking away from boys all healthy outlets?
Well, I tell you, there is no question. I mean, even Rav Aaron pushed boys to play ball. It means very much to me. See, we have a big problem today that, boys are bored and they start going into phones and iPhones and this and that, which is a complete waste of time and just get them into terrible things. And there's no question that if they would do exercise, sports, so there's no question, and my grandfather always advocated that the boys should play sports. And it's a very healthy outlet, and that's what they should do. And it's a big problem in Israel. It is looked down upon by Israeli yeshivas that for boys to play ball. And because they're bored, what do? They go to Afghanistan and get themselves in trouble. So there is no question that my grandfather Zatzal held that playing ball is a very good outlet, and you should play ball. Now here's a different thing entirely. To be a sports fan. So if sometimes people get so involved in it that it takes all their time, and that's all they're thinking about. And it was because my grandfather was a big advocate of spending your time right. So there's a degree to everything. Casually, there's nothing wrong, but when you get into it, and then your whole mind is like a zealous fan, and that your whole mind the whole day, so it takes you away from learning. It takes away from doing other things. Of course, that is not a helpful thing.
But Rabbi Sha'ar,
everything has its limits, its things. So it's better to be in that than other things. But there's as moderate, but I never heard him say, Steinberg, that one should be a baseball fan. He held very much boys should play ball and exercise. He held of exercise and playing ball a lot. But, it didn't seem to mind a moderate thing of being a fan. But as I say, if boys get into really, the players, and, I don't, if you're going to the players, I don't want to go into like you idolize a player, that's not a smart thing to do, because it really takes a person away from Ruchnius.
I understand that you were like one of the first yeshivas in Eretz Yisrael to have a basketball court. Is that true?
Well, it's not really like this. See, there are American yeshivas that have a basketball court. Our yeshiva is like we have a division, a chutz division, but we also have Israeli yeshiva Ketana, and there's a big kollel, about 500 in the kollel. So. And we are in Mattisdorf, which is a very frum, ultra-frum neighborhood. So originally, in the back of the yeshiva, I made a basketball court, and Baruch Hashem, I got permission. And the main thing I explained, and the neighbors around me understood. I said, you're going to take the achrayis if boys are going to do bad things? They need to have exercise. So They understood me very well. See, as I say, I feel bad that it's taboo for Israeli yeshivas to play ball, and I feel bad. So it was the first in the neighborhood that a very ultra neighborhood. But as I say, that they understood that this is for the Americans and they need it. So they did not make an issue with me. But I personally feel that's a very, very important. As a pastime, boys are bored. You have to give them something to do, and so it was very important for me to do this.
Right. Well, Rabbi Chaitofsky, thank you very much. It was an honor having you on with us.
Okay, you should have so much hatzlacha, and use chusim to give out hashkafa and Torah is wonderful, and you should have a lot of nachas and hatzlacha in all your endeavors.
Amen. Thank you very much.
Okay,
bye. We have the honor of having with us on the phone from Wesley Hills, New York, Rebbe Yosef Viener. He's the Rav of Sha'ar HaShomayim. He's a Maggid Shir. You see him frequently as a Mechaber Sfarim. Art Scrolls printed a number of his Sfarim. Welcome, Rebbe Yosef.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, Rebbe Yosef, is it permissible to go to a baseball game? Shea, Moshav Leitzim, Arayis. What's the? What do you say? I'm a spouse to the question. What do you answer?
Right. So when you approach a question where many from people are going, so although there's a big Indian and warning about the issues, possible pitfalls, possibly CERM, you also want to be miyashiv the minig. So with that balance, I'll approach just three things very quickly. One of them is that Ramesha in his tshuva says that there is no iser of chukasem l'salechu. It's not rooted in Avodah Zarah. We clearly know that. It's the way that certainly the guys in the country have a good time. That's why they set up the sports, and that's why people are playing it or going to watch it. So it's not a chukasem issue. Ramesha does have an issue with
even though to many people sports is Avodah Zarah. But it's not mitzvah.
Yeah, the Gemara, right? The Gemara, it's not the Gemara, the Olympics. No, that happens to be the Olympics. did have an accent on real Avodah Zarah, the original Olympic Games, and perhaps carrying the torch. If they want to be Mechabed Jew, I would turn down the kibbutz, because that chok is rooted in Avodah Zarah from the Greeks. But the baseball game, even if they're Mechabed somebody with the first pitch, it's not carrying the torch, and it's not Avodah Zarah per se, or rooted in Avodah Zarah, as you just mentioned colloquially. People sometimes follow it and get too wrapped up and too involved, which leads our Moshe to the second point, is sitting at the game for 3-4 hours. Our Moshe holds his Moshav Leitzim and Bittul Torah. For that, you'd have to, I guess, ask the question to the Miyash of the Minig, what would the people sitting there be doing otherwise? Would they be learning now? Would they not be learning now? It's a little worse because our Moshe seems to term it as a mokum where it's particularly used for spending hours and hours, and he calls it a Moshav Leitzim. With that said, I think, and I probably have some precedent for this, that Moshe and his dar, when asked by the young people, would probably understand that if they're not learning then anyway, and it's the more kosher of the activities, then perhaps there would be some wiggle room over there in terms of what you're pitting it against, what are the choices. But Bittul Torah does get accented, if you'll say, when a person is not only playing it, which is probably good exercise if you're looking for exercise and you enjoy a sport, watching it once in a while versus following the sport institutionally, if you'll call it, and certainly different sports in different seasons, that can lead to a whole lifestyle of tremendous amount of loss of time in general and loss of learning in particular. So that's where it gets, as you said, becomes an avodah zarah, so to speak. I think the point is that, yes, my original disclaimer is there's a mitzvah in the yashiv. What people are doing, they shouldn't be doing something that we're labeling as usher.
Okay, so we spoke about Bechukei Seyim. We spoke about Bittul Torah, and we sort of agree that if it gets out of hand, or if you can be learning, it would be Bittul Torah. If you wouldn't, it's less problematic, like many Paiskim. And, by the way, let me share with you an interesting Evan Azal. And it's particularly interesting because Rabbi Zalman was Rabbi Aaron Kotler's father-in-law. But on the Rambam in Hilchos Malachim, where it says that a melech shouldn't be a drunk, he shouldn't be shatuf b'nashim, right? He shouldn't, he shouldn't be all these things. He shouldn't become sort of licentious. He shouldn't become hedonistic. He
should be doing what the other kings are doing, right?
Yeah. So he asks, why does the Rambam write this by melech? Any person is not allowed to do that. Kal v'chayma melech. So that Ben Azal says, this is Halachos Malachim Perek Gimel, Halacha Gimel. He says something really interesting. He says that Bittul Torah, in other words, he asks Bittul Torah. He says, there's a din of Agisa. He says, Bittul Torah is only if you're standing by and doing nothing. But if you're doing something in your life that you actually enjoy, and you're busy with it, that's not Bittul Torah. And I have to tell you, when I saw this Evan Azal, I almost fell off my chair, because it's certainly not, the Nefesh HaChaim certainly would seem to disagree with that, the Chafetz Chaim, etc. But it's certainly
there's
an opinion.
long list of those. I don't know what context he said it in, but the king
exactly L'Gabe Melech. I'll read.
No, but the king has an extra mitzvah of Asmada, keep in mind. King has an extra mitzvah to write a Sefer Torah. The pasuk says because he has an extra mitzvah, he doesn't stay focused.
So he says, why is he asks Lamam Yesh V'Dagdik V'Mashikas from Din Miyuchad B'Melech. It says Yosef Misharam. And it says by Sharam, Ademas Chayav Adam Lo Motayra Ad Yomosei Pen Yasur Mulvavcha Kol Yemei Chayecha. It's a din b'chal Adam Yisrael, right? And that's the answer. He says Hedjit Mutaloilis Aneg Afshes a Yigrim Levital Torah Behechrach Al Yidei Shikris Ibilos Nashim Ulehedjit Eni Asa Ela Levatal Torah Beli Kol Siba. But if he's doing it without kol siba, but he enjoys being a shikker, or he enjoys, he says there's no din of it, and I just put it out there, something, and it's really a very. Was an Adam Gadol Moed.
And he's maskim, being Rabbi Zalman, and being of Amshver, he's maskim that if a person doesn't elect to do what he's capable of doing, he's missing a large part of his tachas achayim. No one's going to argue that.
Okay. So we spoke about Bechukei Seyim, Bittul Torah. Let's speak about Moshav Leitzim.
So the Moshav Leitzim, I think, again, is a function of a place where it's not just one or two people sitting around. I think Rav Moshe's intent, Rav Moshe mentions both Lashonos, Moshav Leitzim and Bittul Torah, he mentions it twice in the Tshuva, after he tells you it's not Chukasayim. And Moshav Leitzim is a place miyuchud for sitting and having a good time, sometimes a pretty wild time, depending on the sports, in a makom, in a stadium where it's miyuchud for Halachos and these types of things. And there seems to be an extra layer of not being so mutter. I don't want to use the word aser, because Moshe says it's Moshav Leitzim. Again, Moshe knew that we're, as we just discussed, hitting it against to what else the person might be doing, but the makom, as opposed to sitting at home and doing that, is a little bit more miyuchad for that, and therefore you have the extra Moshav Leitzim. One could argue that Moshav Leitzim, in the worst case scenario, is a bunch of good-for-nothing bums sitting in the Bowery, sitting there all day doing nothing and sitting here to do nothing, as opposed to accomplished people who might be learning or whatever they're doing during their daytime activities which are accomplishing, and here they're just doing it to relax. But again, Rav Moshe does use that expression in his tshuva about ball games.
Could you take your kids to the circus? Would that be a Moshav Leitzim? Could they go to Great Adventure? Is Great Adventure a Moshav Leitzim? I mean,
yes.
We're at the Leitzim at a ball game, and I'm just curious, how far do we stretch this?
It happens to be, by the way, there might be, depending on the sport, depending on the season, depending where you're sitting. If you're sitting in the paid-for city-level box, you'd be with a different chevra. There are actually plenty of people in all the above-mentioned places that leave a lot to be desired. You can't answer all of them, and Rav Moshe, I believe, is saying that you have to be careful where you're putting yourself. You have to make a decision how much time you have or need for relaxation, what type of environment you're sitting in, and most importantly, the Moshav Leitzim aspect, I believe, Rav Moshe mentions this as well in the tshuva, is also a function not only of the people sitting there, it's how the people are acting, and people who go to games.
So, Rabbi, if you're going to a Yankee game and you're sitting in their back seats, which are $1,000 a piece, surrounded by, for the most part, I guess, affluent executives, would you say that that's a Moshav Leitzim?
I think one of the questions you had mentioned was the fact that is there a heter, even if you do or don't label it as Moshav Leitzim, or it's Moshav Leitzim, but the other option would also be Moshav Leitzim. Is there a heter to be sitting with the people in front of you, and 2 rows, 3 rows, 5 rows in front of you, and you can't ask them to move, who forgot to, didn't have time to get completely dressed in the morning, let's put it delicately? Is there a heter for the histaklus and the shmiras einayim and all the other things that causes? That's I think.
Would you say a baseball, Rabbi Viener, would you say a baseball game is worse than walking down, I don't know, Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, going, in the morning?
No. Moshe has a tshuva about going to work in Manhattan, getting on the F train from Flatbush or Lower East Side, getting on the train and going to Manhattan. And Moshe has a tshuva, and he says, if this is how you have to get there and you're bumping into people, even yes, like a doctor, you got to go to work. So if you have to go shopping in Manhattan, if a Becher would ask me if they go shopping in Monsey at a place that is a much cleaner environment and doesn't have to see billboards and all sorts of other undesirables, certainly one should avoid it. The question really is this venue a must for the R&R of the person? Is this the only place they can get their relaxation and air out? And is it the best venue for him or his sons or his children to show him this? And I'm just talking about the stockless and the...
Let me ask you another question, Rabbi Viener. What about the cultural issue? We say Havdalah. We say Havdalah every Shabbos, right? Every Matzah Shabbos, right? Ma'avdal ben Kodesh ben Yisrael la'amim. Do you see a cultural issue of, we go to their baseball games, we go to their football games, we start to really identify as, baseball, apple pie, Chevrolet. Do you see an issue with, a cultural issue of sort of becoming one with the Umay Sa'ilam, with going to sports?
It's a very good question. It's definitely an issue. And again, the less you follow, if you have a choice, the more you play for exercise, and the less you follow, and the less you participate in their games, the better off we are, both for the Shmiras Einayim and for the identifying and for the serious issue of Loisechanim, which is also Lashape B'Shivcha. And if you say, yes, look at the great throwing on that Baruch Hu gave him, that would be a mutter heter application in terms of the avoiding Loisechanim. But the whole culture is following them, praising them.
Rabbi Viener,
yeah.
Rabbi Viener, if you buy the Mishpacha this week, or the Ami, or the Yated, pick your favorite, or the Yid, you will find an article extolling the virtues of our dear president.
Okay, this week. After this week. Okay.
Any week. I guarantee you.
Okay.
Is that a Shaila of Loisechanim?
No. If for Dr.
Why?
Shalom, somebody is doing a taiva for the community,
right?
If we decide that they're doing a taiva and we want to express our curse, a taiva, absolutely.
But it's true. That is without a doubt. That's correct. But if President Trump would be reading Ami and Mishpacha, you'd be absolutely correct. He would see the Hakaras HaTov. But they're both too intelligent for him. He only reads the New York Post, I was told. So when the Mishpacha,
his daughter and son-in-law probably get it, and therefore they'll tell
read them. You got to be kidding me! They get the Mishpacha and the Ami magazine.
Let me give you a good example. By the way, I want to give you just a short 10-second blurb on exactly what you're asking. A fellow from my shir, as we were discussing this, I gave a series over 100 shir on Chukosayim, and I'll be summing it up both in the upcoming Sefer and in a few shirim over the summer. And one of the things I took with me, a fellow from the shir who is a businessman, very involved in the world, Chashva Ben Torah, but very connected, very involved with what's going on in this country, came over to me. He says, you know what bothers him the most? When a friend of his tells him when the Yankees win or when the Mets win, comes over screaming, he says, we won. And he said, what is he, crazy? We won? Who's we? You're in the same boat with this fellow? Who's we? So your question is excellent, and that's really the problem. Are we getting to a point where it's we, and it's not, where I'm Levada Yushkin, and we're looking to relax, so relax, but find the most kosher venue and avoid the Losechanim and the Staklos and the more bittul Torah than necessary. That's really the sport. The art of the sport over here is how to avoid most of it and still be able to relax if you enjoy playing basketball or baseball.
So do you see, going back to the president, do you see an issue of this constant idolization in our community with Loisechanim when he's not reading their Yid, I promise you?
It gets to him because I'll tell you why. We live at a time in a democracy, as you well know, that we have a right to voice our opinions. So it has gone from voicing an opinion to making it a daily or a weekly ridicule of any politician in public life or any leader, because people feel, whether anonymously on the blogs or publicly, people love making fun of people. So I think as a community, once in a while, when it's needed, certainly for Dr. Shalom and for our Hakaras HaTov, we need to show our children and our chaverim that, yes, we don't agree with everything, and yes, things aren't done right, and things aren't always done l'shma for altruistic reasons, obviously. However, if we're benefiting from it, and we have some semblance of a Hakaras HaTov, and we want people to continue to help us, we have to have that resonate in the community. So
but Rabbi Viener, let me take a different view of this. I would say that the Asur L'Saper B'Shvachan, right, has to do with the fact that when we speak about Kamanoah Nachrizeh, we now have some type of a hero worship, some type of an admiration, and that goes into our own identity as a Yid, right? It's not Hey Mam Levada Jishkain if you say, wow, look how great these Goyim are, right? So my question to you is, the Halacha in Shulchan Aruch that because of Darkei Shalom, that's Legabe Litein Mein Matnas Chinam. But when you're being Mesaper B'Shvachan, and now you're expressing to our community, wow, Kamanoah Goyzeh, it doesn't take away the din of Hakaras HaTov that you could say, or the fact that you're benefiting because of Darkei Shalom does not take away from the Isser of L'Saper B'Shvachan, because you are now created some type of a role model outside of us.
It has to be balanced, and it can't be said in a light where, yes, they're perfect people and they're the moral example we should be following, 100%. However, L'Sechanim is three applications from the same pasuk. L'Titein Lam Matnaschinem, L'Titein Lam Chen, L'Titein Lam Chanaya, which is Eretz Yisrael, the land issue. And the two, the most common, in office, we give promotional items that we're giving to everybody. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry, we're giving pens, and we're giving all sorts of free items. It's not L'Sechanim at all, because we're doing it either for our curse type for past business, for the connection for possible future business, or for the general seamless atmosphere we want to create within the company, that everybody's on the team and everybody's doing things, and we try to create a happy atmosphere. We have a general low plug lakula here, is that if you are generally doing it for that reason, it's not L'Sechanim. I agree with you. We shouldn't go overboard, and we don't have to say nice things about the midos or about the moral levels or lack thereof that are
so
not
when
to
we
be
speak,
desired. And,
when people speak by their dining room table, and it's just a family there, about the milas, let's say, of the president, and he'll never hear about it, and he'll never know. You think that goes into the level of Darkei Shalom that we have to speak quietly
I think
about?
it does. I think it does, but I think at the Shabbos table you have to speak about balanced views of the milas and the chasarnis. Without looking to poke fun, but it has to be balanced.
Rabbi Varn, is eating at a stadium eichel b'shuk?
I don't think so. I don't think it's particularly chashuv looking, especially if the sauerkraut is dripping down onto your lapel or pants. I don't think it's very bekovedik for a ben Torah. I don't think it's the severity of eichel b'shuk the apostle edus. Because eichel b'shuk is where it's not the societal norm, and the guy's walking through the streets slurping his ice cream cone that's dripping, even though in Manhattan that's probably seen all too often. At the stadium, they're serving, and they're concession serving, and you're supposed to go back to your seats. I think it's better probably to go back to your seat than eat in the hallways. So I don't think it's the actual isser, certainly psul edus of eichel b'shuk.
Okay. In other words, the psul edus of eichel b'shuk is because a person who has no self-respect. But eating in an area that's miyuchid for eating, even though it's not necessarily with a table and chairs, does not mean that the person disrespects themselves.
Correct. I will add that somebody at the Super Bowl asked me a shayla. I'm not condoning going or not going, to tell you what the shayla was. And he tried to reach me during the game. I wouldn't have heard him anyway. But afterwards he said, I want to know what to do next time. He was sitting at the corner seat, and he was taking out a client who was Jewish but not yet from. And the guy ordered a hot dog, and he turned to him and said, Mike, can you pass me the hot dog? And he froze for a moment. How do you pass him a tray for hot dog? So it's not livniva the rice, he can get up and get it himself, but it's Messiah. So I told him, if you did it already, b'makom hesed, you have the dog Movava that holds Messiah, doesn't apply to a mummer, and there are other eterim, but from now on, just the rules of engagement at a stadium, don't sit in the outside seat. So there are things that come up as you're with other people, certainly in a business context, at a stadium that you have to be concerned about. Right.
Is there any heta for Koilisha at a stadium? The woman gets up to sing the national anthem.
Yeah, that's. I think that the person should bring his earbuds and probably listen to this year during the national anthem.
Yeah, but
how they can download it.
If he doesn't have earbuds, well, you're saying he should walk out. Is that what you're saying? In effect, he should walk out.
I mean, people don't walk out, but it's a problem. The heter with the microphone is very schwach. The systems they have, the sound systems, are very good. And the original heterim were given, the Swedish and others, when they spoke about Trey Coley and all the other heterim, were given very limited circumstances for kirum, for an extreme need. There's no extreme need to listen to the national anthem. It shouldn't be making a public protest either, making a chil Hashem, but it's not a great place to be standing there and just listening without a good heter.
But is it possible, Rabbi Varna, that according to many poskim, the isser of Koilisha has to be either of Makira, he knows the woman.
You could see her. I think the film,
or
I would guess the camera goes
could,
on the person.
Yeah, or where you could see her. So if you close your eyes, would that be a
again, all these are tamer for b'diavad situations. The question we're dealing with over here in the context of all the isurim we're talking about, the l'sichanim and the astaklis and the bittul Torah and the apostle Moshav Leitzim and all that. How necessary is it to be there? If they're singing the national anthem at the beginning, can you come at the one half an inning in and miss it? If you know, it's not like a surprise. Oh, they're singing the national anthem. I think it's pretty standard. So
I understand, but I'm asking you again, aren't there many poskim who say that if you close your eyes, there wouldn't be a problem if it's Einim Akira? And could you be Saimach on those poskim?
Not really. Rav Yosef, when he discusses even on the radio, it's debatable. The heter is certainly a machlokes, and Ena Makiro is usually if there is a heter b'shas l'chak, when you can't see them, don't see them, or won't see them. Not if you will see them if you open your eyes, which most people do open their eyes, or if you see them afterwards.
Could a boy collect baseball cards? The boys in yeshiva, can they collect baseball cards?
If he doesn't get into Lo Sichanim and it doesn't end up creating a whole matzav and a whole racket with flipping cards and all the other things associated with them, but besides the Lo Sichanim and the Bittul Torah, that can get into issues of cultivating gambling and all sorts of other geneva and pseudo geneva issues for young children. And that is a problem. The Rabbi tell me that still exists.
You don't think that we should just let our boys be boys?
You can. If it's not going to get to Leissachan, if it's a passing phase, and a boy's into it, and he's in 4th grade, and it's going to pass in a few months, it's not going to become a lifelong, Satmarov said something very interesting. He said, you have to let boys and girls be boys and girls and get them toys and the like, but he said, get them toys that they will naturally grow out of as they grow older. Because if you don't do that, then we have big boys in big pants with the same toys, sometimes adult toys, but still into the same Narishkeiten.
So, Rabbi Viener, let me ask you,
how often do they grow out of it?
Rabbi Viener, if a boy goes to yeshiva today that has a high school or an elementary school, and he takes secular studies, and he learns about George Washington, he liberated the country. Now, could we teach about George Washington, or do we say that it's asal asaper b'shvachan? Abraham Lincoln, he freed the slaves. He was a great president. Reagan took down could we learn history, or is it a problem of Leisachanim?
I think there are no beferish arayas, but I have some remuzim that there might not be an Issa Leisachanim if the person you're talking about is no longer alive. So that would be one possible heter. It's not clear. There aren't any clear rayas.
It's not Baron Shulchan Aruch, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's not right. But there are. I have rayas. I gave a few sherm just on this point. I had a few rayas, and I believe that it's a possible svara lahakol. That together with the fact that if you're learning basic political science and basic history, and you want to know whether it's possible in the design of democracy or even monarchy to have some honest people who do the right thing, and therefore we should know how to identify that and how to vote and how to interact to the extent we need to in government and in the shtadlus in that regard, then it has its milas in terms of teaching them.
So somebody speaks about they did. Somebody's learning about Monet, about an artist, right? He's learning about Rembrandt. Can we teach about Rembrandt and Monet, or we have a Leisachanim?
That's a little worse. You could say he had Hashem gave him a gift for drawing. That's self-evident.
So could somebody play Beethoven? Could somebody's into classical music? Can they play Beethoven and Bach and
That's a different shiloh. We're coming to the 3 weeks.
No.
And
they admire Beethoven's work. I mean, can they say, "Wow, that's a great piece"? But could you say that's a great symphony, the 1812 symphony, a fantastic symphony? You're saying shvachim of a guy.
It would depend on whether or not there's a heter who's no longer alive, which, as I mentioned, is not clear cut. I think it might be a possibility. I think with that heter, you need another snif lahakol, and that is what I mentioned about George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. In terms of history and political process, I think there is some advantage of understanding, even at just a basic rudimentary level, of the fact that there can be some honest people. I'm not saying they weren't, but they certainly acted as they were slightly above the other ones, and therefore we should try to motivate people to get those types of people in office if possible. So I think in politics, in terms of society, that might be a value. In terms of Beethoven, it's a more complicated question because Moshe has lengthy tshuvas on music, whether you're allowed to, forget the 3 weeks in Sfira, whether you're allowed to play and listen to classical pieces after the Churban or not. That, as you know, is not a simple sugi at all. The minig seems to be somewhat lahakol, and I'm guessing it's because it's better than the alternative. And I think they understood to wean a generation or two of American Yidden off of what was far more preteistic and more culturally negative. That's probably the better of the two alternatives, but it's still a big topic. So if you're,
it would be problematic to say Beethoven.
Again,
it's problematic to say it's a nice. And if he was alive, Beethoven would be a problem.
If he's alive, then we have the same problem. You could say Hashem gave him a great talent, and look, HaKadosh Baruch Hu put the talent for music into the Bria. You could put it in a way where it's talking about the Shvach of the Beri Elam and what he gave human beings in terms of their talents, and that thereby do away with any Yisr whatsoever, even if they're alive.
Or if somebody's cooking and they say, wow, Julia Child is a great chef. That would be a problem, assuming she's alive. It would be a problem.
If they're alive, it's to fix it up. All you have to do is add a few words and change the focus. Otherwise, as you mentioned, collecting the baseball cards or getting into.
Is there a possibility, Rabbi Viener? Is there a possibility to say that the Isser of L'Saper B'Shvachan, which is a din in Hilchos Avodas Kechavim, the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, I think Yud Ches, right? Is it possible to say that since these people today are not Avdei Kechavim, according to the Ramah, it wouldn't be relevant?
So the Tzitz Eliezer has a long tshuva when he talks about complimenting professors at a professional conference and the like, which I think would be mutter anyway if that's considered Zakei Shalom. But he wants to know, Be'etzem, is there a heter? And he mentioned such a shita that it's limited to Avdei Avodah Zarah, but the standard halacha is where Rebbe the Peskim hold that it applies to any akum. Akum is a bad phrase over here, but that stands for Avdei Kavim Mazot.
Which is the lashon, exact lashon of the Machab is kamenu. It's a Gemara. Kamenu Ovid Kechavim Zeh.
Exactly. You have to keep in mind every single person on earth was an akum man. So
so I'm saying even though the Rishonim. So the Rishonim make an exception to a Ger Taishav, and the question would be, would a Christian today, according to Ramah, not be considered an Akum, and therefore would be Mutter?
Right. So there are two issues with it. First of all, we generally, Roy Peskim hold that it's not only an Akum. It does exclude a Ger Taishav because of a different series of Rayas and Psukim, but the standard guy, even if it's not strictly an Akum, would be included. And number two, that Ramah that you just mentioned about the standard Christian Catholic person being an akum is a very hotly debated issue. The Rabbi Yehuda says that's not pshat in the Ramah, and he says that it is for us. It's certainly Avodah Zarah.
Yeah, but certainly
that's
many.
One. For them, it's not like it. Yeah, many learn the Ramah.
The Magen Avraham learns the Kipshuta, etc.
Right. But now the Yehuda has a long tshuva saying not so. Even without them, it's machlokes, but l'klape us, it's certainly Avodah Zarah. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Needs one, not
so
not
for us to believe in Christianity is Avodah Zarah, but for the goy to believe in it is not Avodah Zarah. So when you're saying in effect,
it's
according to the Ramah,
but again.
So according to that, there would be no problem regardless then.
No, there still would be. I'm saying for two reasons. Number one, most Peskim say it's not limited to Akum. Again, it's has a quote sheeters that say not so.
Okay.
But he's not a Ger Taishav just because even if you hold like the Piskei Teshuvah Pshat in the Ramah against the Rebbe Yehuda, it doesn't mean he's a Ger Taishav. To be a Ger Taishav,
he keeps Zayin mitzvahs b'nei Noach. Part of their religion is to keep Zayin mitzvahs b'nei Noach.
No. The Rambam says the Ferish in Hilchos Malachim that if a person keeps the Zayin mitzvahs, he doesn't keeps it because he thinks it's right, not because he has the wrong religion.
It's true, but the Bahag and Reb Sadi, there's a long list of 7 Rishonim who argue on the Rambam with that.
Right.
So my point is that this would explain a lot of what we do in school, like why we could say George Washington was a great person or Abraham Lincoln was a great person.
Right, but I think it's mutter for the other two reasons I gave. I don't think you have to come on to this because this shita is far from pashut because it probably doesn't apply just to the Avodah Zarah, even though it shouldn't apply to Ger Taishav. I think the George Washington is part of the same Zakei Shalom, being part of the society. We learn very little about American society and yeshivas today, which is fine, which is good. We shouldn't be interacting more than necessary. But the basic history is, I think, A, they're not alive, and B, even if they were, same thing that you asked me about the president. If you have a politician that's doing something good and contributing to society, I think it's important for people to know that we don't always have to ridicule and make fun. You don't have to get closer. You don't have to emulate. You don't have to want to become one of them or run for Senate or a president. But it's important to know that that's a person at least that's cooperating and should be helped. I think there's value.
So Rabbi Viener, you're saying that Darkei Shalom means living with respect for the society and your neighbors, and if part of them is teaching them about the accomplishments of their great people, that goes part of respecting their society.
Yes, to a limited degree. You don't have to go heavy on it, but as you mentioned, your question was just learning about the story of Lincoln and Washington, I don't think he cut down a cherry tree and admitted it, but it probably didn't happen. But if they did something for society and he wrote a nice letter to the first Orthodox synagogue in America, he deserves credit for that. And I think it's important that we let the others know that we give credit and cover to those who help our community and help society.
Rabbi Yosef, it's always an honor to have you on. Thank you so much for your time.
Halacha, Rabbi. Khal.
Bye-bye. Let's go to the chosen winner of this week's riddle.
Shalom Uvracha, regarding your question about Das Mavim, how could the Ran have a sad to say that the reason why the Torah says Mesu Kol Anashim is because Misha Ein Lebanim is Chashuv Kames. The Pasuk by Koyach says the Shem of Benim with Hapam were there. So first of all, Tesis on Daf Zayin in the Dharma over there, in fact it says that's sad, but the Ran held the Pashtotai that there's no right from that Pasuk because maybe the Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu Mesu Kol Anashim V'Akshemas Nafshecha was before the kids were born. But later on, they had kids already. Regarding the second question, how could we say there's a mitzvah la'asad to give truma to Aaron? That's where the Gemara learns that Chiyus HaMisma in Torah. The kasha was mitzvahs v'telos la'asad lovely. On that, Razba and Chidush HaGodis, the end of brachas by the Gemara of Hasidim Shlo Lahaski Yitzis Mitzrayim la'asad. The Razba says that al mitzvahs v'telos la'asad is only on the olam achar hamaveh, but the olam haschiyah, when after that kshiamdu begufam bevadeh chukasem l'reisechem, that all mitzvahs are going to be back intact, and of course on that time already we don't say mitzvahs v'telos la'asad. Kol tov.